Bilirakis, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary O'Rourke, it seems to me that electronic health record modernization is as much a process restructuring and standardization program as it is an IT program. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Admiral Bono, same question.
Yes, sir. Fully agree with that.
Okay. How much of MHS, Genesis, has so far been a process redesigning exercise as opposed to an IT exercise, meaning writing code and installing hardware?
We're fully aware of the depth of change this is going to bring to our healthcare delivery system, and we're on the front end of working on restructuring those workflows and looking at what we have to change across our system.
Thank you. Admiral Bono, which aspects what has been the most challenging part of it?
Yes, sir. I think that the two most challenging parts, and I'm gratified to see that the VA is working on this up front, is governance and change management. Certainly the ability to make the decisions that are needed at the enterprise level to maintain that interoperability and that connection with the DoD effort is extremely important. And I think that what the VA is doing to help make sure that that governance structure and framework is in place is extremely important. The second piece that's extremely important is the change management, and as members and others here at the table have already identified, being able to involve the clinician right from the start is a very important part of that change management effort. And again, I see that what we've learned in our own efforts of deployment and the VA's initial steps to address that are very much in keeping with what we've learned.
Thank you. Secretary O'Rourke, how much of the process redesign is Cerner involved in, and how much is purely VA responsibility?
When it comes to this project, Cerner will be working with us directly to make sure that the process as we redesign them will work in their platform.
Very good. Admiral Bono, the MHS Genesis contract was awarded in 2015, and your testimony indicates its implementation will finish in 4 more years. That's a total of 8 years. VA schedule is 10 years. Are you confident you will be able to finish on schedule? I know that's so important. If you are confident in that, how is the military health system, which spans the whole country, as well as overseas bases, able to do this relatively more quickly than the VA?
Yes, sir. So we'll be doing that. I feel very confident that we'll be able to stay within our timeline that we've projected. Part of our deployment schedule provides that we'll be able to do many of this in parallel as we've been able to apply some of our lessons learned. So there's a lot of synchronization and amplification that we'll be able to do as we've put in place not only the lessons learned from our own personal experience, but also from the lessons learned that we're getting from those that are reviewing our progress.
Okay, final question for Admiral Bono. You've already bought your version of the Cerner EHR and implemented it in your first sites. How do you decide to select some Cerner software packages and not others?
Yes, sir. That was part of our requirements process in which we put together those functions and capabilities that we felt that we most needed to be able to replace our legacy systems.
Okay, very good. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Mr. Lamb, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up first on a question by my colleague, Mr. O'Rourke, about integrating what you learned from the DoD failures into the rollout of the new system. And whoever is best to answer this, please answer it. But some of the specific problems that they saw in the DoD rollout were, for example, prescription requests coming out wrong and referrals not going through to specialists. So just take those 2 specific issues, if you can tell us what you learned from the DoD rollout and how this program is being changed to prevent something simple like that from happening.
Absolutely. I'm going to let Dr. Sweeney answer.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the big lessons learned that we had was that, again, frontline providers have to be involved not only in designing the process, but also in the testing process. I cannot emphasize that enough for myself every day, as well as the people that are involved on the team. Our users will be integral component of the user testing process to ensure that all of this works before we go live, that patient safety is accounted for, that we check off all of the boxes to ensure safety is maintained and the process works if not as well as, but better than the way it works today.
Okay, so how will you ensure that a prescription is always going to come out correctly? Do you do like a drill or rehearsal or something with fake patients basically and your users on the other end to make sure that it works? Or explain to me how that is going to happen.
Absolutely. So the process of testing is where this happens. We not only test the technology to ensure that all of the technology behind the scenes works so that the prescriptions are going where it needs to go, but also that the correct prescriptions for the right patients are going to the right place at the right time. So that not only involves the technical component, but also the users, like I said, on the front end to ensure that all of those boxes are checked. Only when you have all of those things checked off that says, the process is working appropriately and that patient safety is maintained, can you go live in that process, and we have that accounted for in our testing process.
Okay, is that a different testing process than what the DoD used before they rolled this out the first time?
I'm going to defer to Dr.
We tested it through many instances of the different MTFs that we had in the Pacific Northwest. What we actually found, though, was one of the challenges for us is that we had different staffing models up there, and we had not accounted for that in the program. We have since addressed that. Okay,
so it will be a different testing and rehearsal process this time than last time, is my
yes,
question.
We've incorporated that.
Now, Mr. O'Rourke, question for you about the VA budget. We just passed and the President signed into law the VA Mission Act, which basically changes the funding for the Veterans Choice Program from mandatory to discretionary funding and creates an issue next year for the budget cap on the overall VA budget because there's this new funding that has now become discretionary and will count against the VA budget. Are you aware of the issues that that could create for your overall budget?
Yeah, we are aware.
Okay. Are you concerned about the VA's ability to implement this project with the electronic health records given the constraints that are now going to be on your budget?
I believe the Congress has made it very clear on their intent on this project, so we have less concern about the execution side.
Okay. Do you agree that although the contract is for $10 billion, there could be an additional $5 or $6 billion needed for infrastructure and project management?
We're aware of that.
Okay. Do you agree that that is not really accounted for in the current budget planning, especially with this new money from VA Choice going into discretionary funding?
I believe we've been very transparent with the requirements of this contract, both from the contract
and I'm not saying, I'm not asking about the transparency. All I'm asking about is, do you believe that the money that you need, the additional $5 or $6 billion, is threatened by this change in overall funding that's going to push you up against the budget cap?
No, I don't.
So you feel fully confident that despite that change in the Mission Act, that you will have the money you need to implement this project?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Mr. Poliquin, you recognized.